I never thought my own sister would stoop this low. But here we are. Last Tuesday morning, I walked into my mother's kitchen to find papers scattered across her dining table, and my 62-year-old sister Patricia whispering urgently in Mom's ear about making smart decisions for everyone's future. The moment Patricia saw me, she quickly shuffled the documents into a manila folder, but not before I caught a glimpse of what looked like legal paperwork with my mother's shaky signature at the bottom. You won't believe what happened to me, so please like and subscribe. Let me know in the comments what country you're watching from. My name is Margaret Davis, I'm 59 years old, and I've been watching my 84-year-old mother Eleanor slip deeper into confusion over the past 2 years. Some days she's sharp as a tack, remembering every detail of our childhood. Other days, she asks me 3 times in an hour if I've seen her reading glasses while they're sitting on top of her head. It breaks my heart, but what's breaking it even more is watching my sister Patricia Williams take advantage of Mom's vulnerable moments. Patricia has always been the type to look out for number one. Growing up, she was the golden child who could charm her way out of any trouble, while I was the responsible one who cleaned up her messes. Now, at 62, she's facing her own financial struggles after her husband left her with massive credit card debt, and suddenly she's become Mom's most devoted daughter, visiting 3 times a week with flowers and homemade cookies. "Margaret, you're being paranoid," my husband Robert Davis said that Tuesday evening as I paced around our living room, still shaken by what I'd witnessed. "Maybe Patricia was just helping your mother organize her bills or something innocent like that." Robert's always been the voice of reason in our 34-year marriage, but this time his calm demeanor only frustrated me more. "Robert, you didn't see the way Patricia's face went white when she saw me?" I insisted, stopping mid-pace to face him. And Mom looked so confused, like she didn't even understand what she was signing. Patricia had her hand guiding Mom's pen, for crying out loud. Robert set down his newspaper and really looked at me then, his weathered face creasing with concern. "What exactly do you think Patricia was having your mother sign?" "I don't know yet, but I have a terrible feeling it has something to do with Mom's will, or maybe even the house," I said, sinking into the armchair across from him. "You know how Mom always promised that the family home would be split equally between Patricia and me. It's been in our family for 60 years, Robert. My grandmother's rose garden is still blooming in that backyard." The next day, I called my best friend, Linda Chen, who's been my closest confidant since we started working together at the county clerk's office 15 years ago. Linda has this incredible ability to see through people's nonsense, probably from dealing with frustrated citizens filing paperwork all day long. "Linda, I need your advice about something that's been eating me alive," I said when she answered her phone during her lunch break. "Shoot, Margaret, you know I've got time for you," Linda replied, and I could hear the concern already creeping into her voice. I explained the whole situation, from Patricia's recent increased attention toward Mom to the suspicious document signing I'd interrupted. Linda listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I love most about her. She doesn't jump to conclusions or offer quick fixes. She thinks things through. "Margaret, honey, this sounds serious," Linda finally said. "Have you talked to your mother directly about what she signed?" "I tried yesterday when Patricia wasn't around, but Mom just got flustered and said something about making sure everyone's taken care of." When I pressed for details, she changed the subject to asking if I wanted some leftover pot roast. "And Patricia? Have you confronted her directly?" I sighed heavily. "You know how Patricia operates, Linda. She'll just turn it around and make me look like the bad guy for not trusting family. She's been doing that dance since we were kids." What I didn't tell Linda was how scared I felt. Not just about potentially losing my inheritance, but about losing my connection to my family's history. That house holds every Christmas morning, every birthday party, every milestone moment of my childhood. Mom and Dad brought both Patricia and me home from the hospital to that house. Dad taught me to ride a bike in that driveway. Mom and I planted tulips together in that front garden every spring for 20 years. Later that week, I decided to visit Mom alone on Thursday afternoon when I knew Patricia would be at her part-time job at the department store. I found Mom in her favorite rocking chair on the front porch, watching the neighbors' kids walk home from school. "Hi, Mom," I said, settling into the wicker chair beside her. "Beautiful afternoon, isn't it?" "Oh, Margaret, sweetheart, I didn't hear you drive up," Mom said, her face lighting up with genuine pleasure. "I was just thinking about how your father used to love watching the children come home from school. He always said it reminded him of when you girls were small." We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the maple leaves dance in the gentle breeze. This was one of Mom's good days. I could tell by the way she tracked the conversation and remembered Dad without getting upset. "Mom, I wanted to ask you about some paperwork Patricia brought by earlier this week," I began carefully. "I noticed you two were looking at some documents when I stopped by Tuesday morning." Mom's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her features. "Oh yes, Patricia's been such a help with all those confusing legal things. You know how I've never been good with paperwork, especially since your father passed." "What kind of legal things, Mom?" "Well, she said something about making sure everything's in order, for when I'm not around anymore," Mom said, her voice getting smaller. She explained it all very carefully, but honestly, Margaret, sometimes I feel like my brain is full of cotton when people start talking about legal this and legal that. My heart sank. "Did you sign anything, Mom?" "Patricia said it was important, and she's always been so smart about these things," Mom replied, but I could see doubt creeping into her eyes. "She said it would make things easier for both you girls in the long run." That evening, I called Robert at his workshop, where he was refinishing an old dining table for our neighbor. "Robert, we need to talk when you get home," I said. "I think my worst fears about Patricia might be coming true." "What did you find out?" he asked, and I could hear him setting down his sanding block. "Mom confirmed she signed something, but she's not clear on what it was." Patricia told her it would make things easier for both girls. But something about this whole situation stinks, Robert. Patricia's never cared about making things easier for me. "What's your next move, Margaret?" "I don't know yet, but I'm going to figure out exactly what Patricia had Mom sign, even if I have to hire someone to help me do it." The weekend passed slowly, with me checking my phone constantly, hoping Mom would call with more details, but dreading what I might learn. Sunday evening, as Robert and I were cleaning up after dinner, Linda called. "Margaret, I've been thinking about your situation all weekend," she said. "I have an idea that might help you figure out what's really going on." "I'm all ears, Linda." "What if we do a little detective work? Nothing illegal, just some smart investigating to protect your mother's interests." The trap I'd missed finally sprang shut. "What kind of detective work?" I asked Linda, settling into the kitchen chair with a cup of tea. "Well, you said your mom signed something, right? There has to be a paper trail. Did Patricia leave anything behind? Maybe your mom has copies somewhere?" I thought about Mom's house, how she'd always kept important papers in the old oak secretary desk in the living room. "You know what, Linda? You might be onto something." Mom's always been organized about keeping documents, even with everything that's been happening lately. The next morning, I drove over to Mom's house, my stomach churning with each mile. When she answered the door, she looked tired, more confused than she had just days before. These fluctuations in her clarity were becoming more frequent, and it broke my heart every time. "Oh, Margaret, how nice," Mom said, but there was a vagueness in her eyes that hadn't been there during our last conversation. "Hi, Mom. I thought I'd help you organize some paperwork today. You mentioned things feeling overwhelming lately." "Did I? Well, that sounds lovely, dear." She led me into the living room, moving more slowly than usual. I spent the next hour carefully going through the secretary desk with Mom, trying not to alarm her. In the bottom drawer, underneath old Christmas cards and expired warranties, I found a manila folder that made my blood run cold. "Mom, what's this folder?" I asked, pulling out documents with letterhead from a law office I'd never heard of. Mom squinted at the papers, looking genuinely confused. "I'm not sure, dear. Patricia said I should keep everything together, but I can't remember what it's all for." My hands shook as I read through the documents. It was worse than I'd imagined. Patricia had somehow gotten Mom to sign papers that would transfer the house and most of Mom's savings into Patricia's name, with some complicated language about care management and estate planning. "Mom, do you remember signing these papers?" "I remember Patricia explaining something, but it all sounded so complicated," Mom said, wringing her hands. "She said it would protect me, make sure I had good care. She's always been the smart one about business things, you know." I felt sick. The documents were dated just last week, and they looked official enough to be legitimate. But something about the whole setup felt wrong. The law office address seemed questionable, and the language was confusing even to me. "Mom, I need to take these papers home to look at them more carefully, okay? I want to make sure everything's really in your best interest." "Should we call Patricia?" She said she'd handle everything. "Let's wait on that, Mom. I just want to understand what we're dealing with first." That evening, Robert found me at the kitchen table with the documents spread out everywhere, a legal pad covered with notes beside me. "What did you find?" he asked, looking at my face. "It's bad, Robert, really bad. These papers would basically give Patricia control over everything. The house, Mom's bank accounts, even medical decisions. And look at this clause here." I pointed to a section I'd highlighted. "It says something about Patricia having the right to redirect inheritance assets for Mom's care needs. That doesn't sound right, Margaret. Wouldn't your mom need a lawyer present for something this big?" That's what I keep thinking. The whole thing feels rushed and confusing, almost like it was designed to be hard to understand. I called Linda that night, reading portions of the documents over the phone. "Margaret, this sounds like elder abuse to me," Linda said bluntly. "Your mother wasn't in a clear state of mind when she signed this, was she? Some days she's sharp as ever, but other days she can barely remember what she had for breakfast. Patricia obviously picked a bad day to present this stuff." "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet, but I can't let Patricia get away with this. These papers would leave me completely out of the picture, and worse, they'd give Patricia the power to make decisions that aren't necessarily in Mom's best interest." The next morning, I was back at Mom's house, this time finding her in the middle of one of her clearer periods. She was watering her plants on the back porch, humming softly to herself. "Mom, I need to talk to you about those papers we found yesterday." "What papers, dear?" My heart sank. She was already slipping back into confusion. "The ones from Patricia's lawyer, about the house and your money." "Oh yes, Patricia's been handling all that." "She's such a good daughter, always looking out for me." I sat down beside her on the porch swing. "Mom, I need you to listen to me carefully. Those papers you signed give Patricia control over everything you own. Do you understand what that means?" For a moment, Mom's eyes cleared, and I saw a flash of the sharp woman she'd always been. "Everything? But what about you, Margaret? This house was supposed to go to both you girls. That's what I'm worried about, Mom. I think Patricia may have taken advantage of your confusion. Mom's hands started shaking, and she set down the watering can. Oh no, Margaret. What have I done? I thought I was being responsible, making sure everything was taken care of. Patricia made it sound so important, so urgent. It's not your fault, Mom, but we need to figure out how to fix this. Just then, I heard Patricia's car pulling into the driveway, and my stomach dropped. I hadn't expected her to show up today, but here she was, walking up the front steps with that confident stride she'd had since we were kids. Well, isn't this cozy? Patricia said, stepping onto the porch. Margaret, what brings you by so early? I stood up, clutching the folder of documents. We need to talk, Patricia, about these papers you had Mom sign. Patricia's expression didn't change, but I caught something cold flickering in her eyes. Those are private legal documents, Margaret. Mom's personal business. Personal business that happens to cut me out of everything and put you in complete control? But what Patricia said next revealed just how calculated this whole scheme really was. Patricia's smile turned razor-sharp as she crossed her arms. Margaret, you always were the dramatic one. Mom came to me for help because she was worried about making mistakes with her finances. She wanted someone responsible to handle things. Responsible? I felt my voice rising. You mean someone who would manipulate her during her confused moments? I did no such thing. Patricia's voice remained eerily calm. Mom called me 3 weeks ago, crying because she'd forgotten to pay her electric bill and was terrified they'd shut off her power. She begged me to help her get organized before something terrible happened. Mom looked between us, her confusion deepening. I don't remember calling anyone. See? Patricia gestured toward Mom. This is exactly why these arrangements were necessary. Mom, you told me you were scared of losing the house because you couldn't keep track of the payments anymore. I watched Mom's face crumple with uncertainty, and my heart ached for her. The worst part was that Patricia's story might even be partially true. Mom had been struggling more lately, and the thought of losing her independence terrified her. Even if that's true, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady, that doesn't explain why you needed to cut me out completely. We could have worked together to help Mom. Patricia let out a short laugh. Work together? Margaret, when was the last time you even visited before this week? I've been handling Mom's doctor appointments, her grocery shopping, checking on her every day. Where were you when she really needed help? The accusation hit like a punch to the stomach because there was truth in it. I'd been so caught up in my own life that I hadn't realized how much Mom was struggling, or how much Patricia had been doing. Patricia's been such a help, Mom said quietly, patting my sister's hand. I don't know what I would have done without her. But then Mom looked at me with those clear, sharp eyes again. But Margaret, you're my daughter too. Why wouldn't you be included in everything? Patricia's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Mom, we talked about this. Margaret lives 3 hours away. She has her own life, her own responsibilities. It made sense to keep things simple. Simple for who? I demanded. Patricia, these documents give you complete control over everything. You could sell this house tomorrow, and Mom couldn't stop you. I would never do that. But you could! That's the point. The three of us sat in tense silence for a moment, the morning air heavy with unspoken accusations and hurt feelings. Mom continued looking between us, and I could see her trying to process everything through the fog of her condition. Finally, she spoke up. Girls, I'm getting confused again. Margaret, dear, would you make me some tea? And Patricia, you stay here with me. I wanted to protest, worried about leaving Mom alone with Patricia. But I also recognized that Mom needed a moment to collect her thoughts. As I headed toward the kitchen, I heard Mom's voice behind me, stronger than it had been all morning. Patricia, I need you to explain something to me. If these papers are just to help me manage my affairs, why does Margaret seem so upset about them? I paused in the doorway, curious to hear Patricia's response. Mom, Margaret's always been jealous of our relationship. She's probably worried she won't get as much money when you're gone. The casual cruelty of that statement made my blood boil, but before I could respond, Mom's voice cut through the air with surprising sharpness. Don't you dare talk about your sister that way, Patricia. And don't talk about my death like it's just a business transaction. I stepped back onto the porch to see Mom sitting straighter, her eyes clearer than they'd been in months. Sometimes stress or emotion seemed to cut through her confusion like a knife. Now, Mom continued, I want both of you to sit down and explain this situation to me like I'm the adult and mother that I still am, confused or not. Patricia and I exchanged glances, both of us chastened by Mom's sudden authority. Mom, I began carefully. The papers Patricia had you sign give her power of attorney and name her as the sole beneficiary of your estate. I'm not upset about money. I'm upset because it means I have no say in your care if you need help making decisions later. Mom nodded slowly. And Patricia? Why didn't you discuss this with Margaret first? Patricia shifted uncomfortably. I thought it would be easier to handle things myself. Margaret's busy, and frankly, I wasn't sure she'd be interested in dealing with the day-to-day responsibilities. That wasn't your decision to make? Mom said firmly. This is my family, my home, and my life. Both of my daughters should be involved in any major decisions. I felt a surge of gratitude toward Mom for her clarity in this moment, but I could also see Patricia's face hardening with resentment. Fine, Patricia said, standing up abruptly. If that's how you feel, maybe Margaret can start taking on some of the actual work, instead of just showing up to complain about the paperwork. The challenge in her voice was unmistakable, and I realized this confrontation was far from over. Patricia had been building her case for months, positioning herself as the responsible daughter while I'd been absent. Even if we could fix the legal documents, the underlying family dynamics were much more complicated. But what happened next would test whether our family could survive this betrayal, because Patricia's phone started buzzing, and the look on her face as she read the message told me our problems were about to get much worse. Patricia's face went pale as she stared at her phone screen, her fingers gripping the device so tightly her knuckles turned white. What is it? Mom asked, her voice still carrying that sharp clarity from moments before. Patricia looked up at us, and for the first time since I'd arrived, she looked genuinely frightened. It's a message from the bank. They're questioning some of the recent changes to Mom's accounts. My stomach dropped. What changes? I may have moved some money around, Patricia said quietly, not meeting my eyes. Just to make sure Mom's assets were properly protected. Mom stood up slowly, using the porch railing for support. Patricia Ann, what exactly did you do with my money? The use of Patricia's full name made both of us flinch. It was Mom's serious voice, the one she'd used when we were children and had crossed a major line. I transferred some funds into a joint account, Patricia admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The financial advisor said it would make things easier for managing your expenses. How much? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Patricia hesitated. About $60,000. Mom sank back into her chair, the color draining from her face. 60,000? Patricia, That's nearly half of what I have left after your father's medical bills. I was protecting it. Patricia's voice rose defensively. Do you know how easy it would be for someone to take advantage of you? I've read about elder fraud, about people who target seniors with memory issues. So you decided to target her yourself? The words came out harsher than I intended, but I was too angry to care. That's not what this was. Patricia whirled on me. Where were you when Mom was calling me at 2 in the morning because she couldn't remember if she'd paid her bills? Where were you when she got lost coming home from the grocery store last month? I've been handling everything alone. Mom looked up sharply. You got lost, Mom? Mom's hand went to her throat, a gesture I remembered from childhood when she was embarrassed. I took a wrong turn. It wasn't a big deal. You were missing for 3 hours, Patricia said. I drove around the entire neighborhood looking for you. I felt a stab of guilt. Patricia was right about one thing. I hadn't been around for the day-to-day struggles, but that didn't excuse what she'd done. Patricia, even if your intentions were good, you should have talked to me, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. And you definitely should have asked Mom before moving her money. Asked me what? Mom said, looking confused again. The stress was clearly affecting her ability to follow the conversation. Patricia and I both noticed the shift immediately. The sharp, authoritative mother from a few minutes ago was fading, replaced by the uncertain woman who sometimes forgot our names. Nothing, Mom, Patricia said gently. We're just discussing some financial planning. Don't you dare minimize this to her, I said, my anger flaring again. Mom, Patricia moved $60,000 of your money into an account with her name on it, and she had you sign papers that give her complete control over your finances and medical decisions. Mom blinked slowly, processing this information. I don't remember signing anything important. Patricia, did you explain what I was signing? Patricia's face crumpled. I thought I was protecting you, both of you. Margaret, I know you think I'm being greedy, but I'm terrified. Terrified of losing her. Terrified of making the wrong decisions. Terrified of watching her disappear piece by piece. For the first time, I heard the genuine fear in my sister's voice. The manipulation, the secrecy, the financial maneuvering, it was all coming from a place of panic. But you can't protect her by cutting me out, I said. We need to work together. How? Patricia demanded. You live 2 hours away. You visit once a month if we're lucky. How exactly are we supposed to work together when I'm the one dealing with everything? It was a fair question, and one I didn't have a good answer for. My job, my life, my routine, they were all built around the assumption that Mom was still the independent woman she'd always been. Mom reached out and took both our hands. Girls, I may be confused sometimes, but I'm not stupid. I know I'm getting worse. I know things are going to get harder. But I need both of my daughters involved in whatever comes next. Her phone buzzed again, and Patricia glanced at it nervously. The bank wants to schedule a meeting. They're asking about the power of attorney documents and whether Mom was competent when she signed them. Oh, God, I breathed. Patricia, if they think you coerced her or that she wasn't mentally capable of making those decisions, I could go to jail. Patricia finished, her voice hollow. And Mom could end up as a ward of the state while they sort everything out. The three of us sat in stunned silence as the full implications sank in. What had started as a family dispute about inheritance and control had potentially become a legal nightmare that could destroy us all. But as I looked at my sister's terrified face and my mother's confused expression, I realized our family crisis had just taken a turn that none of us were prepared for. And the next decision we made could determine whether we'd all end up losing everything we were trying to protect. The silence in Mom's living room felt suffocating, broken only by the persistent tick of the grandfather clock in the corner. The same clock that had marked time through our childhood arguments, family dinners, and now this crisis that threatened to tear us apart completely. Patricia set her phone down with shaking hands, the screen still glowing with the bank's message. I never thought, when I was having Mom sign those papers, I was so focused on making sure she'd be taken care of if something happened. I didn't think about how it would look to outsiders. Mom squeezed my hand tighter, her grip surprisingly strong despite everything. Patricia, honey, can you tell me exactly what those papers said, in simple terms? The power of attorney gives me the right to make financial and medical decisions if you become unable to, Patricia explained, her voice barely above a whisper. And the account. I moved your savings into a joint account so I could access it to pay for your care without having to go through legal processes each time. But that's not how the bank sees it, I said, trying to keep my voice gentle despite the panic clawing at my chest. They see a situation where someone with cognitive issues signed away control of their assets to a family member who then immediately moved a large sum of money. The late afternoon sun was slanting through Mom's lace curtains, casting intricate shadows across the coffee table, where Patricia's paperwork still lay scattered. Everything in this room spoke of stability and permanence. The family photos spanning decades, Mom's collection of ceramic birds on the mantelpiece, the worn spot on the carpet where Dad used to pace during football games. Yet here we were, watching it all potentially slip away because of misunderstanding and fear. Patricia suddenly stood up and began pacing, her movements jerky and agitated. What if we just reverse everything? I could transfer the money back, tear up the power of attorney documents. Would that fix it? I don't know, I admitted. And honestly, we might need those legal protections in place. Mom, how often have you been having trouble remembering things? Mom was quiet for a long moment, her fingers worrying the edge of her sweater. More than I've been letting on. Sometimes I forget what day it is. Last week I couldn't remember how to work the washing machine, the same machine I've used for 15 years. And sometimes... She paused, looking embarrassed. Sometimes I don't recognize the woman in the mirror right away. The admission hung heavy in the air. Patricia stopped pacing and sank back into her chair, tears streaming down her face. That's why I've been so scared. That's why I've been trying to handle everything myself. I didn't want to burden you with this, Margaret. But keeping me in the dark made everything worse, I said. If I'd known how bad things were getting, I could have helped figure out a better way to handle the legal and financial stuff. Now we're all in this mess together. Mom's phone rang, startling us all. Patricia glanced at it and went pale. It's the bank again. Don't answer it, I said quickly. Not until we figure out what we're going to say. The phone eventually stopped ringing, but the damage was done. We all knew this wasn't going away, and every hour we delayed responding would likely make things look worse. Margaret, Mom said suddenly, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. If something happens to me, if I get to the point where I can't take care of myself, would you be able to move back here? Or at least closer? The question I'd been dreading. My job, my apartment, my entire life was built around being 2 hours away. But looking at my mother's face, seeing the genuine fear and confusion there, I realized that the comfortable distance I'd maintained wasn't going to work anymore. I don't know, I said honestly. But I need to figure it out. We need to figure it out together. Patricia wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. The bank meeting is scheduled for tomorrow morning. They want to see all three of us. Mom to verify her mental state, me to explain the transactions, and you because you're named as the alternate power of attorney in the original will. Wait, I said, sitting up straighter. I'm named as alternate? You never told me that. Because I was hoping it would never come to that, Patricia said miserably. I was hoping I could handle everything and you could just live your life. Mom struggled to her feet, moving slowly to the window overlooking her garden. The roses she'd tended for 30 years were in full bloom, a riot of red and pink against the green backdrop of her perfectly maintained yard. You know what the hardest part about getting old is? She said without turning around. It's watching your children suffer because of your problems. I never wanted either of you to have to deal with this. Mom, you didn't choose to have these problems, I said, joining her at the window. But we're your daughters. We're supposed to deal with difficult things together. Even if it means one of us might go to jail? Patricia asked, her voice hollow. The question hung in the air like a threat. Tomorrow's meeting with the bank could go several ways. Best case scenario, we could explain the situation and work out a solution that protected Mom while satisfying their concerns about the legality of the transactions. Worst case scenario, they could decide Patricia had committed elder abuse and turn the matter over to authorities. But as I stood there looking out at Mom's garden, watching a cardinal land on the bird feeder Dad had built years ago, I realized that regardless of what happened at the bank, our family had reached a turning point. The old way of doing things, Patricia handling everything alone, me visiting when convenient, Mom pretending she was fine, wasn't sustainable anymore. We need a plan, I said finally. Not just for tomorrow's meeting, but for everything that comes after. Patricia joined us at the window, and for a moment we stood together like we used to as children, watching the world outside while trying to make sense of the chaos inside. What kind of plan? First, we survive tomorrow's meeting, I said. Then we figure out how to actually take care of Mom properly, together. And if that means I need to make some major changes in my life, then that's what I'll do. Mom reached out and took both our hands again. Girls, I need you to promise me something. Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever comes next, we face it as a family. No more secrets, no more trying to protect each other by keeping things hidden. Can you promise me that? Patricia and I nodded, but even as we made that promise, I could see the fear in my sister's eyes. Tomorrow's meeting wasn't just about clearing up a misunderstanding with the bank. It was about determining whether our family would survive this crisis intact, or whether the very thing Patricia had been trying to prevent, losing everything we cared about, was about to happen anyway. The cardinal flew away from the feeder, disappearing into the growing dusk, and I couldn't help but wonder if it was some kind of omen about what we were all about to lose. That night, I lay in my childhood bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing through every possible scenario for tomorrow's meeting. The house felt different now, smaller somehow, as if the weight of our secrets had been pressing against the walls all these years, and now that they were out in the open, everything had shifted. I could hear Patricia moving around in the guest room next door, probably unable to sleep either. Mom had gone to bed hours ago, but I'd noticed the light under her door had stayed on longer than usual. We were all processing what tomorrow might bring. Around midnight, I heard footsteps in the hallway and the soft creak of the kitchen door. I pulled on my robe and found Patricia sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea surrounded by papers. Couldn't sleep either? I asked, pouring myself some water. I keep thinking about what I'm going to say to them, Patricia said, not looking up from the documents. How do you explain that you were trying to protect your mother by essentially stealing from your sister? I sat down across from her, studying her face in the dim light. She looked exhausted, older than her 43 years. Tell me something, Patricia. When did you first notice Mom having problems? Real problems, not just the little things we all laughed off. Patricia set down her cup and rubbed her temples. About 2 years ago. She called me one morning, completely panicked, because she couldn't remember how to work the washing machine. Not just which buttons to push, but what it was for. She was standing in the laundry room crying, holding a load of wet clothes, completely lost. The image hit me like a physical blow. Why didn't you tell me? Because by the time I got there, she was fine again, acting like nothing had happened. And when I tried to bring it up later, she got so angry with me for suggesting she was losing her mind. She made me promise not to tell you because she was terrified you'd put her in a nursing home. I felt something twist in my chest. I would never do that. I know that now, but back then, you were so busy with your life, and when you did visit, Mom would put on this performance. She'd spend days before your visits writing down conversation topics and rehearsing stories so she'd seem normal. I started to feel like I was the only one who really knew how bad things were getting. So you decided to handle everything yourself. Patricia nodded, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. The first time she asked me to help with her finances, it seemed innocent enough. She said the bank statements were confusing her, and could I just make sure everything looked right? But then I found checks she'd written for thousands of dollars to telemarketers, bills that hadn't been paid in months. She'd given her credit card number to someone over the phone who promised to lower her interest rates, and they'd maxed out her account. I leaned back in my chair, overwhelmed by the scope of what Patricia had been dealing with alone. That must have been terrifying. It was. And every time I tried to talk to her about it, she'd either get furious and accuse me of treating her like a child, or she'd get so upset and confused that I'd end up promising to just take care of it for her. Patricia's hands were shaking slightly as she reached for her tea. The inheritance transfer seemed like the only way to protect what Dad had left for both of us. But why not tell me then? Even if Mom didn't want me to know about her condition, surely protecting the inheritance was something we could have discussed. Patricia was quiet for a long moment, staring down at the papers spread across the table. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with guilt. Because part of me was angry at you, Sarah. Part of me thought, why should I have to ask your permission to protect money that I'd been earning through years of caregiving while you lived your life 3 states away? The honesty of it stung, but I found myself nodding. That's fair. That's actually completely fair. But it wasn't right, Patricia continued quickly. It wasn't right, and the more time that passed, the harder it became to figure out how to fix it. I kept telling myself I'd transfer everything back once we got Mom's finances stabilized. Once we figured out a long-term care plan. Once a dozen different things happened. But those things never happened, and meanwhile, the secret just got bigger and bigger. I reached across the table and covered her hand with mine. We can't change what's already been done, but we can figure out how to move forward. What if they don't believe us tomorrow? What if they think I deliberately took advantage of Mom? Before I could answer, we heard soft footsteps, and Mom appeared in the kitchen doorway in her nightgown and robe. Her hair was mussed from sleep, but her eyes were alert and focused. "Girls, what are you doing up so late?" she asked, though she didn't seem surprised to find us there. "Just talking about tomorrow," I said. "Mom, you should get some rest." "I can't sleep either," she admitted, pulling out a chair and joining us at the table. "I keep thinking about your father, about what he would say if he knew what we were dealing with." Patricia and I exchanged glances. Mom's nighttime confusion had been getting worse, according to Patricia. But right now, she seemed completely present. I think Dad would say that families mess up sometimes, but they stick together anyway, I said carefully. Mom smiled, and for a moment, she looked exactly like the woman who had raised us. Your father would be very proud of both of you. Patricia, for taking care of me when I needed it most, even when I made it difficult. And Sarah, for coming home and helping us figure this out instead of just being angry. But what about tomorrow? Patricia asked. What if... Tomorrow we tell the truth, Mom interrupted, her voice surprisingly strong. All of it, and we deal with whatever consequences come from that truth. But we do it together. I looked at my mother and sister sitting in the soft kitchen light, surrounded by the evidence of our complicated, imperfect attempts to take care of each other, and realized that somewhere in the middle of this crisis, we'd actually started to become a real family again. But as Mom reached across the table to squeeze both our hands, I caught a flicker of something in her eyes that made my stomach drop. A momentary confusion. A brief second where she seemed to forget where she was, or why we were all sitting there in the middle of the night. Tomorrow's meeting wasn't just about explaining Patricia's actions to the bank. It was about confronting the reality that Mom's condition was getting worse, and that whatever solutions we found would need to account for a future none of us wanted to imagine. I watched the confusion flicker across Mom's face, like a shadow passing over the sun. For just a moment, she looked around the kitchen as if she'd never seen it before, her grip on our hands loosening. Mom? Patricia's voice was barely a whisper. You okay? The fog lifted as quickly as it had come, and Mom's eyes refocused on us. I'm fine, sweetheart. Just tired. But the tremor in her voice said otherwise, and we all knew it. Maybe we should all try to get some sleep, I suggested gently. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Mom nodded but made no move to get up. Instead, she stared down at our joined hands on the table. I need to tell you both something while my head is clear. Patricia and I waited, the kitchen suddenly feeling smaller around us. I know I'm getting worse, Mom said quietly. The confusion, the memory problems. I have good days and bad days, but the bad days are coming more often. Mom, you don't have to, Patricia started. Yes, I do. Mom's voice was firm. Because tomorrow, when we meet with James at the bank, they might ask questions about my mental state, about whether I was competent when I signed those papers. My stomach clenched. What are you saying? I'm saying that some of those times Patricia brought me documents to sign, I wasn't entirely sure what they were. I trusted her, so I signed them anyway. Mom looked directly at Patricia. That's not your fault, honey. I should have said something, but I was scared of admitting I was losing myself piece by piece. Patricia's face crumpled. Mom, I'm so sorry. If I had known... You would have done exactly what you did, Mom said firmly. You would have tried to protect me. But we can't protect each other from everything, can we? The weight of her words settled over us. I thought about all the times I'd called over the past year when Mom seemed perfectly fine, never suspecting the battles she was fighting in silence. So what do we tell James tomorrow? I asked. The truth, Mom repeated. That I signed papers I didn't fully understand because I was starting to lose my ability to understand them. That Patricia was trying to handle an impossible situation. And that we're all doing the best we can with something none of us know how to handle. Patricia was crying now, quiet tears streaming down her cheeks. What if they think I was taking advantage of you? Then we deal with that too, Mom said. But Patricia, look at me. Patricia lifted her eyes to meet Mom's gaze. You spent the last year watching me slip away bit by bit, and you never once made me feel ashamed or broken. You kept our house running. You made sure I took my medications. You covered for me when I forgot things or got confused. If that's taking advantage, then I wish more people would take advantage of me that way. I felt tears stinging my own eyes. Mom, why didn't you tell me how bad it was getting? She turned to me with a sad smile. Because you have your own life, Sarah. A career, responsibilities. I didn't want to be another burden. You're not a burden. You're my mother. And you're my daughter, which is exactly why I wanted to protect you from this as long as possible. Mom squeezed my hand. But I see now that trying to protect each other from the truth just made everything more complicated. We sat in silence for a moment, processing the weight of her admission. Finally, Patricia spoke up. James is going to want to know about the power of attorney documents, she said. About when you signed them and whether you understood what you were signing. Mom nodded slowly. I remember that day. It was one of my clearer days, actually. You explained that it would help you manage my affairs if I had problems later. I understood then, and I agreed to it. But the inheritance paperwork was different? I asked. Some of it, yes. Mom's brow furrowed as she tried to remember. There were so many papers over the months. Some days I knew exactly what I was signing. Other days, she trailed off, shaking her head. Other days, I just trusted Patricia to look out for my best interests. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence that followed. I could see Patricia struggling with something, her hands fidgeting with her coffee mug. There's something else, Patricia said finally. Something I haven't told either of you. Mom and I both looked at her expectantly. 3 weeks ago, Dr. Morrison called. He wants to schedule some additional tests for Mom. Cognitive assessments, brain scans. He said he's concerned about the progression of her symptoms. Patricia, why didn't you tell me about this? Mom asked. Because I was scared of what the tests might show. And because I thought if I could just handle everything myself, maybe we could avoid facing it. Patricia's voice broke. I thought if I could keep everything stable, keep all the legal stuff sorted out, then when Sarah came home for Christmas, I could pretend everything was normal for just a little while longer. I felt a surge of understanding mixed with frustration. So you were trying to protect all of us? And ended up making everything worse instead. Mom reached over and tilted Patricia's chin up. Sweetheart, you're 26 years old. You shouldn't have to carry this alone. But someone had to do something, Patricia protested. The bills were piling up. There were decisions that needed to be made, and you were having more and more days where you couldn't focus long enough to understand the paperwork. Then you should have called me, I said, trying to keep the hurt out of my voice. I would have come home. Would you have? Patricia asked quietly. Or would you have tried to handle it all from Chicago, making phone calls and sending instructions? The question hung in the air, and I realized I didn't have a good answer. Would I have dropped everything to come home? Or would I have convinced myself that I could manage the crisis from a distance? I guess we'll never know, I said finally. But we know now, and we're here now. Mom yawned then, a real yawn that made her eyes water. I think my body is finally ready for sleep. But girls, I want you to promise me something. What? Patricia and I said almost simultaneously. Whatever James says tomorrow, whatever complications we have to deal with, we deal with them together. No more trying to protect each other by keeping secrets. No more handling things alone. I promise, I said. Me too, Patricia whispered. As we helped Mom to her feet and walked her to the stairs, she paused at the bottom step. There's one more thing, she said, her hand gripping the banister. The reason I can't sleep tonight isn't just because I'm worried about tomorrow. Patricia and I exchanged glances. Then what is it, Mom? I asked. Mom looked up the stairs toward her bedroom, then back at us. I can't remember if I locked the front door. And I can't remember if I checked the stove. And I can't remember if I took my evening medication. Her voice grew smaller with each admission. 3 hours ago, I knew I had done all those things. But now I can't trust my own memory. The full reality of what we were facing hit me then. Tomorrow's meeting wasn't just about sorting out paperwork and explaining Patricia's decisions. It was about confronting the fact that Mom needed more help than any of us had been willing to admit. And as I watched my mother climb the stairs, moving slowly and carefully like someone who wasn't entirely sure her legs would support her, I realized that our biggest problem wasn't what Patricia had signed or what James might say. Our biggest problem was figuring out how to take care of someone we loved who was slowly disappearing, one memory at a time. Patricia and I went through the evening routine with Mom, checking each item methodically. The front door was locked. The stove was off. Her pill organizer showed she had taken her evening medications. But I could see the relief in her face when we confirmed each thing, and the way she watched us check, as if memorizing our process for future reference. Thank you, she whispered as we tucked her into bed. I hate feeling like I can't trust myself. After she fell asleep, Patricia and I retreated to the kitchen. The silence stretched between us until Patricia finally spoke. It's getting worse, isn't it? I nodded, staring at my cold cup of tea. When did you first notice? About 8 months ago. She called me 3 times in one day, asking if she'd already invited me for Sunday dinner. Then she started writing herself notes, little reminders stuck all over the refrigerator. Patricia's voice cracked slightly. Last month, she got lost driving to the grocery store she's been going to for 20 years. Patricia, why didn't you tell me? Because I kept thinking it was just stress, or maybe side effects from her blood pressure medication. I wanted to be sure before I scared you. She looked at me across the table. And honestly, I was scared that if I said it out loud, it would make it real. I understood that feeling completely. Is that why you had her sign those documents? You were worried she might not be able to make those decisions much longer? Patricia nodded slowly. The power of attorney, yes. I thought if something happened suddenly, someone needed to be able to handle her affairs. But the will changes. She paused. Those happened on one of her bad days. She was confused about money, thought she was running out. She kept saying she didn't want to be a burden on anyone. So she decided to leave everything to you because you were here taking care of her? She said you had your own life, your own career. She was worried that if she left you the house, you'd feel obligated to move back and take care of her. Patricia met my eyes. I should have stopped her. I should have insisted we wait until she was thinking more clearly. The pieces were finally coming together, and I felt some of my anger shifting into something more complicated. Patricia hadn't been scheming to steal my inheritance. She'd been trying to navigate an impossible situation while watching our mother slowly lose herself. We need to talk to James about all of this tomorrow, I said. Not just about the legal documents, but about Mom's condition. There might be options we don't know about. What if there aren't any good options? Patricia asked quietly. What if she keeps getting worse? I didn't have an answer for that. Instead, I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Then we'll figure it out as we go. Together. We sat in the quiet kitchen for another hour. sharing memories and worries, until exhaustion finally drove us to bed. But as I lay in my childhood room, staring at the ceiling, sleep eluded me completely. Around 3 in the morning, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Then Mom's voice, confused and slightly panicked. "Patricia? Margaret? Where is everyone? I can't find anyone." Patricia and I both emerged from our rooms at the same time. Mom was standing in the hallway in her nightgown, looking around as if she didn't recognize where she was. "We're right here, Mom," I said gently. "You're in your house. It's nighttime." She looked at me with a mixture of relief and embarrassment. "I woke up and couldn't remember if you girls had gone home. For a minute, I couldn't even remember if you lived here or if I was supposed to be somewhere else." As we guided her back to bed, I caught Patricia's eye over Mom's head. The fear I saw there mirrored my own. Tomorrow's meeting with James wasn't just about inheritance anymore. We needed to start making plans for a future none of us had wanted to imagine. But first, we had to get through the night, and I was beginning to wonder if any of us would sleep at all. As I settled Mom back into bed, she grabbed my hand with surprising strength. "Margaret, I need to tell you something important before I forget again. About your father's safety deposit box. The one Patricia doesn't know about." My heart skipped as Mom's words hung in the air. Patricia had stopped in the doorway, and I could see her shoulders tense even in the dim light filtering in from the hallway. "Mom, let's talk about this tomorrow," I said gently, trying to ease her back onto her pillow. "You need your rest." But her grip on my hand only tightened. "No, Margaret, I might not remember tomorrow. I've been trying to tell you for days, but then Patricia was always there, and I didn't want her to feel left out." She looked past me toward the doorway where Patricia stood frozen. "Oh, Patricia, honey, I didn't see you there." The silence stretched uncomfortably. I felt caught between wanting to hear what Mom had to say and not wanting to hurt Patricia any further. We just started to rebuild our relationship, and now this. "It's okay, Mom," Patricia said quietly, stepping into the room. "If there's something important about Dad's things, Margaret should know." Mom looked confused for a moment, as if she'd already forgotten what she'd started to say. Then her expression cleared. "The bank box. Your father opened it the year before he died. I was supposed to give you the key when you turned 30. But then, with everything that happened..." She trailed off, looking between Patricia and me. "What's in the box, Mom?" I asked. "I don't remember exactly. Some papers? Maybe some jewelry from his mother? He said it was for you specifically because you reminded him so much of her." Mom's voice was getting drowsy again. "The key is in my jewelry box, taped under the bottom drawer." Patricia moved to sit on the edge of Mom's bed. "Mom, why didn't you ever mention this before?" "I meant to. I kept meaning to." Mom's eyes were drifting shut. "But then Margaret was so busy with her job, and you were here helping me, and I kept forgetting to bring it up when it mattered." After we got Mom settled and back to sleep, Patricia and I stood in the hallway looking at each other. The weight of another secret, another complication, hung between us. "I really didn't know," Patricia said. "About the safety deposit box, I mean." "I believe you." And I did. The surprise on her face had been genuine. "Do you want to look for the key now?" she asked. I shook my head. "Tomorrow, after we meet with James." I think we've had enough revelations for one night. But as we said goodnight and returned to our rooms, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were uncovering layers of family history that had been buried for years. Dad had always been a quiet man, someone who kept his thoughts to himself. The idea that he'd left something specifically for me, something Mom had been carrying the knowledge of all these years, felt both touching and overwhelming. I also couldn't ignore the look I'd seen cross Patricia's face when Mom mentioned the safety deposit box. It wasn't jealousy exactly, but something more complicated. Maybe hurt that Dad hadn't left something similar for her, or maybe worry about what other surprises were waiting to surface. When I finally drifted off to sleep near dawn, I dreamed about Dad showing me his mother's jewelry box when I was little, telling me stories about his childhood that I'd half forgotten over the years. In the dream, he kept trying to give me a small brass key, but every time I reached for it, it would disappear. I woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of voices downstairs. James had arrived early, and from the serious tone of the conversation drifting up from the kitchen, it sounded like Patricia had already started filling him in on Mom's condition. As I got dressed, I found myself wondering what other secrets this family house was holding, and whether Patricia and I were strong enough to handle whatever we discovered next. As I made my way downstairs, my mind was already racing through everything that needed to happen today. The safety deposit box felt like both a gift and another complication in an already overwhelming situation. Part of me wondered if Patricia resented that Dad had left something specifically for me, while another part of me felt guilty for even having that concern when we were supposed to be working together now. James looked up from his coffee as I entered the kitchen. His expression was more serious than I'd seen it since this whole mess began, and I could tell Patricia had briefed him thoroughly on Mom's deteriorating condition. "Good morning, Margaret," he said, setting down his mug. "Patricia was just telling me about your mother's episodes yesterday. I think we need to discuss some practical matters." Patricia handed me a cup of coffee, and I noticed her hands were steadier than they'd been in days. Something about having concrete problems to solve seemed to ground her in a way that the abstract guilt and family drama couldn't. "Before we get into the legal stuff," I said, "I want to understand something, Patricia. When you were getting Mom to sign those papers, did you really believe you were doing the right thing?" She sat down across from me, and for the first time since I'd caught her with those documents, she met my eyes directly. I convinced myself I was. When I watched her struggling to remember Dad's name, or when she'd ask me the same question 5 times in an hour, I thought someone needed to make sure everything was protected. But honestly, she paused, wrapping her hands around her coffee mug. I think I was terrified of being left with nothing. Of you coming back and taking over, when I'd been the one here dealing with everything. The raw honesty in her voice caught me off guard. I'd expected more defensiveness, more justification. Instead, she sounded exhausted and scared. "I should have called you sooner," she continued. "Should have asked for help instead of trying to handle it all myself. But I kept thinking I could manage, that I could be the responsible one for once, instead of the sister who needed rescuing." James cleared his throat gently. "This conversation is important, but we do need to address some immediate concerns. Your mother's capacity to make legal decisions is now clearly compromised. We need to establish proper guardianship and make sure all her affairs are in order while we still can." "What does that mean exactly?" I asked. "It means we need to move quickly to get the power of attorney documentation properly executed before her condition deteriorates further. The papers Patricia had her sign aren't valid anyway because of how they were obtained, but we need legitimate protections in place." Patricia looked stricken. "How quickly are we talking?" "Ideally today, while she's still having clear moments. From what you've both described, those windows are getting smaller and less predictable." I felt the weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders again. Every decision we made now would affect Mom's future, and potentially the rest of our lives as a family. The safety deposit box suddenly seemed less important compared to making sure Mom was protected and cared for properly. "There's something else," I said, and told James about the safety deposit box Dad had apparently left for me. He nodded thoughtfully. "That's not uncommon. Many people leave specific items or documents in safety deposit boxes for family members. Once we get the power of attorney situation resolved, we can access it together. It might even contain information that helps us understand your father's intentions for the estate." Patricia shifted uncomfortably. What if there's something in there that changes everything? What if Dad really did intend for Margaret to inherit more than I realized? The vulnerability in her question made my chest tight. This wasn't about money anymore, if it ever really had been. It was about feeling valued, about understanding our place in the family, about the fear that we might not have been as important to our parents as we'd hoped. "Patricia, whatever's in that box, we'll deal with it together," I said. "I'm not here to push you out or take over. I'm here because we're family, and that means we figure this out as a team." She nodded, though I could see she was still struggling with the uncertainty. James closed his folder. "Why don't we start with getting your mother up and seeing if she's having a clear morning? If so, we can handle the power of attorney paperwork. After that, we can decide about the safety deposit box." As we headed upstairs to check on Mom, I realized how much had changed in just a few days. Patricia and I had gone from adversaries to something closer to allies, though we still had work to do in rebuilding trust. The crisis with Mom's health had forced us to confront not just the immediate practical problems, but the deeper issues that had been brewing in our family for years. Mom was awake and seemed more alert than she'd been the previous evening. When James explained what we needed to do, she listened carefully and asked relevant questions. It was a relief to see glimpses of her sharp mind still functioning, even if we couldn't count on those moments lasting. "I want both my daughters involved in any decisions about my care," Mom said firmly as James prepared the documents. "Margaret, I know you have your life in the city, but Patricia's been here taking care of everything. You'll need to work together." Patricia and I exchanged a look, and I saw something like hope in her expression for the first time since I'd arrived.